guys, it's Alec Torelli, and welcome to the Hand of the Day. I put out a lot of hands recently about some big folds I've been making, and I got some good feedback and a lot of people calling me nits for folding too often and being too careful at the table. So I thought I'd put out a fun hand that I played against Tony G heads up in a PKR event in London. This was like 4 or 5 years ago.
Playing style, I've watched him a bit, seen him on TV, whatever, here and there, and I know he's very, witty, charismatic, and likes to.
But it's an example of the complete opposite situation where you find yourself with a really marginal hand and you're forced into perhaps making a big call. So I'm going to walk you through it. We'll go through the details and you can see it. But the thing to keep in mind is really less about what exact two cards you have and more about the actual situation that you're in and how your hand plays relative to your opponents, not necessarily the absolute value of your hand. So this is a good example of how that comes into play. We're halfway through the match. No really significant history that we've seen so far with Tony and I, but the blinds are 300, 600. He limps on the button, which he's been doing very rarely. So I don't think he's trapping me here. I don't think he has a big hand. I just think that it's one of those times he wants to see a flop cheaply with some marginal hand. So I go ahead and check the big blind, and the pot's 1200, and we go to the flop.
Two of those spots on the river when he didn't have it.
The flop comes queen 8-4 with queen 8 of clubs. So I have 5-4 offsuit. I flop bottom pair. I go ahead and check here, which is pretty standard. I think I'm going to be checking pretty much everything to him on the button. And he goes ahead and checks behind me. He checks really quickly here, and if you kind of notice the way he checked on the flop, I don't feel like he was really thinking about betting. I don't think he really was trapping me here with a big hand. So that kind of plays into some of my reads later in the hand.
If you run up against Tony G again, are you going to just...
The turn comes an offsuit 8, which is a great card for me, pairs the board, and it makes it less likely that Tony has an 8, but I think that it's really unlikely I'm beat in this spot because he would have bet the flop with any queen or 8 in his hand. So, and if he does have a 4, I'm also chopping with any 4 besides king 4 or ace 4. So it's a really good card for me. I go ahead and bet 800 into 1200, and Tony calls. How he called on the turn here, as well as how he decided to check on the flop here, led me to think that he wasn't trapping me at all. I think both situations, you could see watching the video that it wasn't like he was debating raising me here. I don't think he was really deciding to trap me. It's a really weak way to play an 8. I think if he had an 8, miraculously, if he somehow checked the flop, he would have raised the turn with it, especially with the draws out there, and try and make it look a little fishy. So I really think my hand is good here almost always. I think he has something like ace high, which is a pretty likely hand, or he has a 4. So I think worst case I'm chopping, and best case he has ace high. So that plays into my decision on the river a lot, and it's important to just really understand how someone's likely to play all the streets so you can really put them on a specific hand, because it affects your decision that you're going to make on the river, especially in this spot. The river comes a king of clubs, and it could seem like this is a really bad card for my hand, but it's important to note that it's really unlikely that this card helped Tony in any way. He really can't have a king in his hand unless he has king 4 specifically that didn't bet the flop, which I just think is so unlikely. He never really calls the turn with king high, I don't think, and he can't have a flush because he would have bet the flop with any flush draw for sure, or he would have raised the turn. So he really can't have a flush draw. So I think at this point my hand is good. And even though it's unlikely that I get value from worse often, I think that I fold out some chops. If he has a 4, I think I could get him to fold. So I think because his range is basically condensed to ace highs and 4s, I think betting here is good. And I think betting bigger is better as well. And another reason to do that, not just specifically about the hand I have, but just from a position of power, like my hand looks so much stronger than Tony's hand because I can have all the hands that he can't have. I could have any 8, I could have any flush, and I could also have a king. I could be bluffing the turn with king high and hit a king. Whereas Tony can't have any of those hands. So when your hand range is way stronger than your opponent's, it's good to bet almost independent of what hand you actually have. So I go ahead and bet here. I kind of merge my range, and I think I'm going to get him to fold some chops, which is also like a really good reason to bet here in my specific hand.
Is there a weird kind of value bet here?
There is jack 10s, jack 9s, 5, 6, 7, 6, all those hands have missed, so he thinks that Tony thinks he's going to show up with those hands quite a lot of the time here, so it's a good value bet from Alec Torelli.
always expecting to get called by ace high. That's the only thing you can beat to get called with, right?
Yeah.
7,000.
Wow!
That's a good play from Tony. Now,
I bet 2,300 here, hoping for a fold. You know, fold him off a chop, and he goes on and raises me to 7,000. So now I got to think about, you know, what hands is he possibly raising me with, and when you think about how he analyzed the hand before, it's really unlikely that he has me beat. I think he's really only representing a flush here. I don't think he would raise with trip eights because he would have raised the turn with that hand. And he wouldn't raise when the flush card gets there because it's so likely that I have a flush. So it just don't make sense that he's raising me with any flush combination. I also don't think he could have a flush because he checked the flop and he would bet with all his flush draws. So I think that at this point he's just bluffing here. And I think it's, you know, he could be turning a 4 into a bluff and we could be chopping, but I think that it's often he's turning ace high into a bluff as well. So I just think his range is mostly bluffs at this point, and I'm getting a decent price to call, but it's mainly that I think he's bluffing it.
He's not calling though, is he? Is he thinking about calling?
So I went ahead and made a big call here. I turned out to be right. And I think when you really analyze the entire hand and you could really systematically break down exactly how your opponent is likely to play a hand on each street, it gives a lot of insight into the subsequent streets, what hands he could actually be holding. So this is an example of when I think it's a great time to make a big call instead of a big fold like you guys have seen in previous videos in the past.
I mean, if you call here and you get shown a flush or a full house, it's so spewy. But he's done it.
yeah, it's a really good call.
Made a big call.
Oh, that's gonna hurt G hard. Wow. Yeah, it called you with 4s, Tony. How'd he do it?
So I hope you enjoyed this. If you guys have hands you would like me to review on my channel that you played, that you would like my feedback on, go ahead and send them to me. Head over to my blog, alectorelli.com, and send them to me there. I will select the best ones and put them right here on this channel. Otherwise, subscribe to my blog, click up here, and I will see you guys next week. Thanks for watching. Cheers.